Okay, hello and welcome to all. So today we have Nitya with us, who is a parent of two almost adult. Almost one is almost adult, the other is a teenager. Yeah, so they are 16 and 12.
16 and 14.
16 and 14. Yeah, okay. So they have been unschooled throughout their life, never been to school.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start with why never been to school. So this was
I mean,
long time back. So at that time,
yes.
how did you come to this decision conclusion of not sending them to school?
Yeah. So, firstly, of course, I didn't know this term unschooling then. And I wouldn't say that I was an unschooler. I would say that I started my journey thinking that children should be at home. It was just a very strong kind of intuitive feeling that, children need a safe space. They need to be with the parents, particularly the mother, and they need a sense of freedom and space, which if you put them in school from a very young age, that all those things are missing. They have to follow somebody else's routine and do what somebody else tells them to do. So it was a very basic thing like that. It was just that I felt they needed to play and they needed to have time and they needed to explore. So it started like that. And I think part of it came from my feeling from my own schooling that somehow, what I felt, what I needed was never met, and that it didn't really matter in the system. That as a child, that what your feelings are and how you're coping with things and what you really want to do and how you feel, none of those things really matter in a school setting. It's really about performance and outcome and validation from external sources. So these three things I felt were actually very damaging, and that to grow up free of that would result in sort of an emotional strength and resilience, and so I felt that that was important. But to be honest, when I started, I had a lot of preconceived notions. I had a lot of expectations on how I would do things. And I did sort of create structures that I felt that the children should follow. But as I was observing them and observing how they engaged with things around them, with life really, with everything around them, inanimate objects, animate objects, trees, birds, the street, the leaves, everything, that children live very much in the moment, and they don't value certain activities over other activities. They just respond to whatever's around them wholly. So they don't feel like reading a book or drawing or making something is more important than playing with a stone. Everything gets a lot of attention and a lot of focus and a lot of love really from the kids in what they're doing. But as adults, our response to that often is to take them away from it, because we come with our conditioning of, is
What is right?
Krishna sitting on the tree for 3 hours? Should he be doing something else? And never feeling that that's enough, or somehow that, always feeling that there should be some production, they should be doing something rather than just being whatever they are. So I began watching myself and my own responses to many of these things. The need to control, the need to dictate, the need to tell them what to do, the need to tell them how to do something. And it's very disempowering for children when you take away their autonomy and you don't allow them to relate to things in the way they relate, right? So if they get hurt, they have their own way of dealing with that hurt, which will be to cry, and then to maybe, do something else. Or but often our responses to that hurt is either we rush to do something about it. Are you okay? Shall I wash you? Shall I do this? Shall I? Because you feel being a good parent is that, right? To take care and to do things, which I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I'm saying is that there is also a natural response that we have as human beings when something happens to us, which is maybe tears will come and we need to cry things out. So those kind of processes are, I think, healthy and important. And to hold space for your child at that time is makes them, look to themselves rather than to you for dealing with things, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain. And like my younger one, when he was very little, he sometimes he would cry, and he had a very beautiful way of describing his tears. He would say, "This is sad water." uh, if he were Sometimes he would say, "This is not sad water, this is sleepy water, this is happy water, this is," so he knew where that emotion actually came from. But as an adult, you forget that, right? You forget the source of things and you put it all under one thing. Oh, there's pain, and every pain needs a solution. Whereas tears represent so that those things were like waking moments for me. And it's not like I didn't look for schools or I didn't look for communities. I did. I took Krishna to a place called Shibumi. It's a
Okay.
school outside Bangalore.
Okay.
It was started by some people from the Krishnamurti schools, Valley School, then CFL. They started, and one of my old teachers started it, and he was very keen that I come there. So I did take Krishna there for about 5-6 months, but I couldn't understand why they wouldn't let my child just do, like, sit in a tree or eat slowly or, play in the mud when he wanted to play in the mud. It didn't make sense to me that even an open school has so many regulations and constantly telling the child what to do. And I suddenly saw that in the long term, this is the most damaging thing. And it has damaged me also, that kind of upbringing. I can see the damage in myself. So I just took the call that we're not doing this anymore. So the school was very upset and they were willing to change the whole school actually I mean, the person who was running it, he was very willing to, listen to me and try to change things. But I just felt that I can't make my child subject to that. So we came out, and they've been at home ever since. And I think it's been really wonderful for us to live together and learn together and be together. And probably as adults, that's what they will get the most out of their childhood, the sense of having been at home and having been free. So
Yeah,
that was
I love the way you said we always want the child to keep doing something. Like, we always we prioritize, like, for example, watching screen as low and maybe reading a book as high. Maybe the knowledge that
right.
is gained from both maybe more, or watching a television might be even more than reading a book, because they are visually even seeing it and understanding it. But yeah, I think, like you said, we have this preconceived notion as to what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, and we kind of tend to decide it for the child.
Yeah. And I think very often as parents, we operate out of fear. We don't actually operate out of love.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
of
like
course, we
fear of
all,
the past or fear of the future. Fear because
yeah,
something
it's,
happened to me, fear because something might happen to you.
yeah, exactly. So we of course all love our children, no doubt, but we don't operate from that space of love. which means acceptance, which means listening, which means respecting, and which doesn't mean control. Whereas fear manifests as control, or, we can call it guidance. Like many parents will say, I don't control my child, I just guide them, because they do need parents to guide them. Of course, guidance means what? What does it mean actually? It means that when your child reaches out to you, that you're available to them, actually. It means that you're listening. It means that you hear them fully. It means that you're present, you're not on your phone and you're not distracted. I'm guilty of all those things. It's not like, that I am saying something that, oh, I was so free of that. No, I was very guilty of, like, I would be thinking about the food.
Correct.
What shall I make for lunch? When shall I finish off my work? And the children know it. So sometimes they'll hold your face and they'll turn you very gently to look at them, And that's actually a very heartbreaking moment for me when my children do that, because I immediately feel that, I haven't listened. They know I'm not here. I'm somewhere else, and they are trying to bring me, saying, I'm here, I'm here, Mama, listen to what I'm saying, or I'm talking to you. So I think, and we feel that everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be done a certain way. And I think we ourselves are not free. So we don't model that freedom. We're constrained by so many things. We're easily distracted. If you look at adults are so easily distracted. Even in conversation, it's very hard. People can't listen. They have so much to say, Yeah. So as adults, we lose that sense of total attention. And like, if you notice your child, if he gets a new toy, right, or something, the first thing they want you to do is they want you to share that toy. Like my children, when they used to get something, they'll say, come and play with this. Come and see it. Whereas if you get a toy, if you get a new computer or you get a new phone, first thing you will say is, don't touch my phone. Be careful. It might break. So, there's such a difference in how children see life. They're always inclusive. And we are always excluding.
And even when you get them a toy, you tell them this is your toy, and we still want to, impose that this is how you're supposed to use it. This is how it works.
Yes.
Don't break
exactly.
it, don't throw it, don't do this, don't do that.
Yeah. Or, be careful. We spent so much and got you this toy. So keep it carefully, don't just throw it around, So yeah, we don't really allow
them to
a full engagement. Yeah. I mean, there are gentle ways in which you can show that things should be taken care of, or that it does. See, very often people think that this process of letting children engage in the way that they want to means that they're going to be careless, they're going to be irresponsible, they're going to be disrespectful, and they're going to be spoiled, and that they can never do anything that they don't want to. But in my experience, it's completely the opposite. I think the more you respect children, the more they're able to respect others. Though the more freedom you give them, the more responsible they are, and it's really a kind of ironic that we think that control is going to lead to discipline and other things, whereas actually I feel that discipline exists. And what we do as parents is that we take them out of it. We distract them. We try to, like if a child cries, very often we will try to distract them from that. No, we'll say, oh, look at the bird, look at this. Did you see this? Or, so we teach them from a very young age that don't respond to your pain, hide from your pain, run away from it. uh, those are unhealthy things which as adults we try to correct.
Correct. Actually, just as you were saying, I just remembered when my son, he's 4 years old, and when he was a little younger, he would jump from the sofa. My husband, being very cautious, he would always stand next to him. So my son would always do kind of circus and try to, not really be responsible. With me, I tell him, see, you know what you're doing. It is your responsibility that, you are safe. And I just step back a step, and then he's okay. Like he knows what are his limits. He does whatever. He's like, he's more careful than I am, than I would
Yeah.
be.
But you know why that is? It's because you're trusting him,
Yes.
which allows him to trust himself. So when he trusts himself, he knows then his limits. He's in tune with himself. So he knows that this will lead to hurt. And this level of hurt I'm okay with. This level of hurt I'm not okay with. So he learns to figure that out for himself, and he trusts himself completely, which is what you want. You want your children to trust themselves, right? You don't want them to grow up questioning themselves constantly, never knowing whether, what they're feeling is valid, and having somebody else have to validate that for them, somebody to, yeah. Sorry, you said something? I didn't catch that.
Someone was yeah, go on. So so you decided to not send your children to school. Okay, so let's just come to a little bit of practical side. So what about writing and reading and maths and science, and how did that happen?
So I read a lot to my children when they were young, every day. And they still make fun of me because sometimes at night I would be reading to them and I would be so sleepy and so tired that I would talk rubbish. Like I would be reading and I would be falling asleep and talking gibberish, and then they have to wake me up and say, yeah, you're talking nonsense, So, but I kept at it. I read, every day, all the time. And Krishna, my older one, I think he's a very audio visual learner. So anything that he sees, he remembers forever. He never forgets it. And anything he hears also, he remembers forever. So he actually started reading at a very young age, maybe 3.5. He was, reading everything and had a very vast vocabulary and knew things that I didn't know. There were animals that he knew that I didn't even know there were animals like that, just from books, looking at books and things. Because media, see, Krishna is 16. There was not so much YouTube and other things when he was young, So a lot of things for him came from books. My younger one, Kanha, never wanted to read. And he liked being read to. And always he would ask me to read. And a lot of things he didn't like doing for himself. Like he liked me to give him a bath. He liked me to play with him. Till he was about 8 or 9, the person that he liked playing with the most was me. So whether it was badminton or whether it was just, other things, he liked playing with me. And I think that it helped him in lots of ways. I'll come to that. But he didn't read till he was about 8.5. I think one fine day he decided that he needed to read something, and then he just learned to read. And then it was not a very long process. He was very quickly.
Once you decide, that is the most difficult part, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
and
go on.
I learned not to pressure. I think with Krishna, I would have done, those things like flashcards or things like that. I might have done. I don't remember now. But by the time Kanha was that age, I think I was a little bit wiser and learned not to pressurize him and not to force him into doing things that he was not ready for. So I think the play was part of that, that I think when children have to play with peers at a very young age, they don't get to play in the way that they want to.
Correct.
They have to start negotiating at a very young age for space, which and the way sometimes, see, as kids get older, and especially kids who go to school or other kids, they're very particular about rules, right? They will only play by rules. That means you are, if this cricket is played like this, you can only play it like this. But younger children like to innovate. They like to change the rules. They like to play how they want. They will want 10 turns at batting and never want to bowl. But that's a very critical thing, that they are allowed to have that, because if they are not, it leads to a lot of frustration later on. If at a very young age they can't express that fully, their creativity is limited, their play gets curtailed, they start feeling pressurized, and they try to keep up with things that they are not ready for. So the older kids are good at something, then they put pressure on themselves to be that when they're not ready, and when they're actually enjoying the playing, and it's not about competition, it's not about scores, it's not about any of those. So I think some of these things at a young age, we are too quick to want to socialize our children. We feel they, and many parents will say, my children are asking to play with other children. But that's because we've already exposed them to that. Whereas when you don't expose them, they will never actually ask for another child to play. They're fully self-contained, but they will ask for the parent, because the parent is a safe space. The parent allows you to play the way you want to play without curtailing that creativity and that freedom and that movement and that happiness and the joy, and doing the same thing for hours together. Whereas with other children, they might get bored. They will want a turn. Then there will be conflict. Then you spend a lot of time negotiating that conflict. So
Shall I give you ice
I
cream?
think this, sorry?
No, no, I think someone, please keep yourself on mute, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
So I think this time when you're young, where you're not quickly put into situations where you have to fight for space, you have to follow, strict rules, and where you can't creatively express yourself. Those situations, I think, are quite damaging to children. So when they have to play just with the mother, it's a very different sort of play. It's very imaginative, it's very quiet, it's kind of very engaged, and they engage more with the play than with the person. Whereas when there are other kids, they become more focused on the other kids rather than on the play. So some of these things I observed in my children, and I think that in letting that happen, those processes, I think my children, they love playing with other kids. They engage, they're very sociable, even with older people. Like I have some guests staying with me right now. They're older, they're in their 70s, and my children engage with them fully. They answer questions, they listen, they're considerate, because they have received that. They have received the consideration, they've received the respect, they've received the freedom. So it's actually quite easy for them to extend it. And just because they didn't go to school doesn't mean that they're not sociable. They're very sociable. And Kana has a big gang of friends that he plays with every day. And it's not that they don't have conflicts. They have conflicts. They resolve it sometimes. Sometimes they all take a break from each other. Sometimes they're upset with each other. So all those natural things happen, but they are equipped to deal with it themselves. And they all have strong boundaries that they have for themselves, not dictated by somebody else. So I think those are some of the things that you get from being by yourself when you're a child. contrary to what most people want. They want socialization, they want other kids, they feel like, my children need other kids to play. But actually, I think it's the opposite. I think they become resilient, they become self-contained, they're content. They don't have to look outside constantly for a validation. They can validate themselves. So, these are some of the things I think of being at home.
I don't know, somehow, somewhere we missed this concept that, children love to stay at home, or children love to play, with their parents, or children want to just be in that world. You just want to push them away and, send them to the real world, telling school is a real world. And I don't know, somewhere we lost something, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, but one thing that helped me a lot was this book. It's called The Magical Child. I don't know if many of you might have read it.
Okay.
It's written by Joseph Chilton Pierce,
Uh-huh.
and it was many, many years ago.
Okay.
But it talks about this emotional existence of children and this need. That nature actually has provided everything that a child needs. Nature has provided the tools to live in this so-called real world. And when you respect that and when you create the space for it, that they can navigate their whole life experience on their own in a very empowered way. So that book actually helped me a lot, and I still read it. It's always on my bedside. Every now and then I still read it. And there's another book which is not as deep, but it has some practical things for people who have 2 children or 3 children. It's called Siblings Without Rivalry. So how to listen to your children, and when they have conflicts between themselves, because that happens with siblings, right? That there is the older child, and this is true of my case also. Krishna, who was toilet trained and everything by the time he was 1.5. When Kanha was born, he was 2 years and 7 months. So I had him in the delivery room with me throughout, except when I was actually delivering Kanha. But he was in the room. He stayed in the hospital with me, and my team of doctors were very supportive of all that. But the minute Kanha was born and we brought him out, he stood in my room and he peed on the floor. That was his kind of instinctive, natural reaction to somebody else coming into that space. And I do feel that I thought I was being very sensitive, but I think there were times when I didn't realize the impact of having the second child on the first child, the sense of loss of the mother. And a friend of mine once said to me, she said, "Oh, Nitya, it's like, your husband comes home one day and he brings a beautiful young woman and he says, 'Oh, you know what? I brought another wife. And from now on, you have to be very nice to her. She's like your sister, and, she's little, so you have to take care of her.'" It's that sort of feeling for a child when the second child comes. It's as much of a trauma, grief, loss, and stress. So I think, this, you're there, Suma? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, some of these things I think I learned as I was watching them, but I was not aware of initially. So, so we've had many challenges like that. I've had to, be there for Krishna, support him in other ways. Once I realized that, there is some loss with the birth of the second child. So at different times, there have been different things, but having them at home has allowed me to be there for these things and to support and be present and watchful, which I think when you send your child away to some place for 8 hours in a day, you can
It's
never
difficult.
respond. You
Yeah.
can never respond to these things. So,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, I mean that's a lot. Okay, so yeah, but you said Krishna learned to read by he was 3, read, write,
Yeah.
and Khana was still 8. So how was that? Like,
Yes.
how like, I mean, when you have 2 kids, you always compare and you'll be like, thinking, okay, this one did at this age and he's still not, still didn't do it. So how was it to wait till 8 years and not really push or not really, like
I
guide?
actually felt the other way. I felt bad that I might have pressurized Krishna. So
Mm.
I was looking at it the other way. Rather than thinking that, oh, Kanha's not reading, I was thinking, God, I've made so many mistakes with Krishna. I didn't give him the space to do it at his own time. Maybe I gave him too much input, and I kind of bombarded him with information, perhaps, and curated his engagement with life too much. I wanted to have good books, and I wanted to have good music, and I wanted, all those kind of things. So I actually felt the other way. I felt sort of guilty that perhaps if I had let Krishna just be the way I was able to let Kanha be, that he might have taken longer, and he might have wanted to do something else, or he might have played different things. But having said that, I have to say that Krishna, even though he's 16, he still plays. He still plays imaginative games. They make up a lot of games. And, he's not past that age of, like if he's reading Greek mythology, he will play like Poseidon, and he will be Artemis, and he will be, those kind of games that children nowadays, you don't see kids playing those games. They, that imaginative role
Correct, correct.
play, fantasy. He
Yeah.
still plays those games. So maybe it was not so,
The mother
damaging
of
in that
12 year
sense.
Yeah.
16-year-old unschooled.
Yeah.
Cancel.
Somebody's asking something.
I don't know.
Sorry, by mistakenly it happened. By
Okay, no
mistake.
Yeah.
worries.
We'll just take question after a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So, if what advice would you like to give to an unschooling parent? Like, what environment should they create, or what should they do, or is there something like you think they should be doing, or they should be giving, or they should be like what should they do, like to give a perfect, not perfect, like rather a good environment for them, for the children
Well,
to.
yeah. I think the first thing that I would say is that restraint is more important than providing things. So the parents' ability to hold back when you feel like saying something, when you feel like correcting your child, when you feel like telling them what to do, step back, ask yourself why you're saying it. What is it that you're trying to do? So restraining yourself, I think, is the most difficult thing. It's much harder than providing things. It's very easy to give them classes and to give them things and experiences and exposure. That's the easiest part. The hardest part is to stop yourself from interfering in their thinking and in their engagement of life in their own way. Even in the most benign ways, it can be very damaging. Like we might say things like, oh, do you really want to do that? It doesn't sound aggressive. It's very passive aggressive, you know, and so it creates a sense of mistrust. What they feel is, oh, my parent doesn't trust me to do this properly, so I can't trust myself. So I think that's something that we have to be very watchful of. The second thing I think is that we can't expect our children to be something that we are not. So if we are dishonest, we can't expect them to be honest. If we are manipulative, we can't expect them to be not manipulative. If we are, rude and aggressive and don't listen, we can't expect our children to be listening and polite. So we cannot do something and think our children will do something else. They are watching us, and they are watching to see how we deal with things. How do we respond to conflict? How do we express sadness or feelings? Do we try to hide them? Do we try to run away from them? Are we vulnerable? Are we? So we have to be what we want our children to be. And that's a big challenge, because we grew up at a different time with different parents and a different conditioning and different expectations. And we had to be all that. We had to be good children. We had to be academically bright. We had to be successful in our careers. We have to be materially successful. And so we have to overcome all those things that were imposed on us. And that is our journey rather than the children's journey. So I would say, children bring themselves up. They're very resilient. They're very happy by nature. And if you don't interfere, they will actually be fine in life with everything. They will do well in whatever they want to do. They will be happy. They will be able to negotiate the so-called real world. Although why their world is not real, I don't know. It defies logic why we think children's worlds are not real. They are really so real. They're so rooted. They know themselves. So I would say